Well, we have 5 different speakers tonight, so please bear with us as we try to switch between presentations and share screens. I think we're trying to do a decent flow to kind of tell you the story of the NAMA Foray, which we used to always call the National Foray, which is incorrect because NAMA is the North American Mycological Association. So it covers the United States, Canada, and Mexico. There have been a couple forays in Canada in the past. Minnesota has hosted a couple times in the past. And I think there's talks about trying to get a foray planned in Mexico in the next few years. So I'm going to bear with me while I do the screen sharing. Now, slideshow. All right, now you guys are seeing my editing screen, right? So I want to do switch screens. Sorry.
It's just not in slideshow mode.
Stop share. I'm gonna give me one more second. Sorry. View, presenter view. All right, and now I'm gonna try to share. Now, can you guys see the proper one, or are you guys seeing?
We're getting the notes, Kathy.
We can present a mode, so just go to switch it. And we should. Yep, it's good.
Great. Thank you, guys. All right. So first, I want to tell you a little bit about the Merrick Tarowski Memorial Scholarship. It was established in 2017, and to date we have 6 winners. All right, come on, advance. I shared a variety of pictures of Merrick because I wanted you guys to see how involved he was with our club, helping out at the state fair, at Da Vinci Fest, giving his knowledge at the different forays, and always sharing the things he found. He loved to eat mushrooms and cook mushrooms and talk about cooking and eating mushrooms, and had a long history with them. Ron wrote a really great article about him for the NAMA newsletter, and I'm going to try to read it without getting choked up here. But our walks in the woods will never be the same without the company of Merrick. MMS has lost one of its finest. One of his last wishes was to attend the annual NAMA Foray that was being held in Cable, Wisconsin that year, and that was 2017. As a means of honoring his legacy, the MMS board created the Merrick Tarowski Scholarship, which will be awarded annually to an MMS club member who may not have had the opportunity or means to attend a NAMA annual foray. By paying for the club foray fees, our hope is that it will broaden the person's knowledge and appreciation of mycology and introduce them to the larger mycological community. May Merrick's memory long live in the Minnesota Mycological Society and NAMA. And these are our 6 winners to date. In 2018, Ryan Franke went to Salem, Oregon. Nick Rajtar went to Paul Smith's New York. Heather Erickson was our winner in 2020, and then the foray was canceled. So she sort of put that on hold. Rosalind Manny won in 2020 and went to Granby. And Heather decided to go to Potosi this year, and along with Aya Mohammed. And then we awarded to Michael Spalding to go to Cable, Wisconsin this year because the NAMA decided to make the Cable Foray a regional foray. And Michael was our runner-up, so we thought that was a great way to send someone to the foray that sort of started the whole thing for us. And so this is a bit about me. I did a kind of title slide for each person who's presenting about their experience. I've been in MMS since 2006. I'm your current vice president, and I'm also on the NAMA marketing committee. So some of the photos you're going to see from me are sort of an overview that I've taken just for my marketing duties as well. The first NAMA Foray I ever went to was in Lafayette, Louisiana. And I remember Ron and some other folks saying, Ron and Adele saying, you should go. And I thought, gosh, I would never have a reason to go to Lafayette, Louisiana. What a great reason to go look for mushrooms. I then went to the Santa Cruz, California one. And so each year a different club hosts, and it's in a different part of the country, and it's at a different time of the year. So that Santa Cruz, California one was in December, which was odd for me to be hunting mushrooms in December. The next year was in the Ozarks in Arkansas, and I decided at the last second to go, and Maggie Taylor and I just jumped in the car and headed down there. The next year was near Mount Rainier in Washington, which again was a whole different terrain to hunt. And then 2015 back to the southeast in North Carolina, and then 2016 Shenandoah, Virginia, and then here we are 2017 Cable. So this is where it all began, and this year, like I said, Cable decided to do the regional foray, and I was invited to do a shiitake cultivation workshop, and a lot of the MMS members came and helped lead forays and do workshops. So we've been quite involved with that foray. I think so. Here's a little video of what the inoculation looks like when it's in action. And I loved the just the actual activity of having all those hands reaching in and getting it done. We got about 25 logs done in about an hour and a half, I think, which is a nice method. Get a bunch of people together and share the work. Oops. Another reason to go to one of the annual forays is to spend time with a lot of the experts. Here's all the collection tables. Ron was helping with ID and Brooke Reed. And just shortly after Britt Bunyard did the lecture, the Amanita lecture for us, he was at the Northwoods Foray and was in the woods talking about amanitas in the field. And mostly it was really nice to just have time to hang out with friends. I've got to see Carson and Laura Gross, who I just met this year. And again, Maggie, who I hadn't seen since before COVID. So it was just a really fun time. Peter hosted a potluck at the cabin they rented, and it was just a really nice time. So now I'm going to pass it over to Michael Spalding, who is a new MMS member and who attended the Northwoods Foray this year.
Hey, Kathy. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to take a moment and introduce myself, and then we'll jump into my presentation. First off, I want to thank the MMS and the board for the opportunity to go to the Northwoods Foray in Cable, Wisconsin. It was a fantastic opportunity. I had the time of my life. I learned so much, and I made long-term friends, some of whom are on the call today. As Kathy mentioned, my name is Michael Spalding. I joined the MMS this year. I signed up before spring, interested in joining some morel forays. And before I had gone into the woods the first time, I entered the Marek Turowski essay scholarship, and I was awarded a trip to the September foray held in Northwoods. I'm a disabled veteran. I have 8 years of active duty with 2 years spent in the reserves, and my disabilities have given me a particular focus on accessibility, as my chronic pain has been in the way of me doing many of the things I love, mycological interests included. I'm telling you this today because my presentation today is going to be focused on accessibility. I was sent to the Northwoods Foray on this scholarship with the intention of bringing something back to the MMS that will enrich our community. But the lesson I walked away with, the piece of information I felt would most enrich our society was that we had an opportunity to lead our national community in accessibility outreach. Accessibility is a growing mindset in communities like ours. If anybody here is also a member of local or national birding communities like the Audubon Society, you've probably heard of a growing movement toward accessibility. It's predicated on the idea that it's our responsibility as a community, as an organization, to ensure that our events are within reach for the people, for the most people possible. And that means two things. First, we should actively plan to include people instead of waiting to be asked. And second, we should make any challenges with a foray or an event or a program transparent, so those with accessibility needs can make their own decisions on if they're able to go. If we collectively put thought into how to make our events and programs more accessible to a wider audience, we can make sure that people with needs rather than our own aren't being left out. And honestly, it's mostly a lot of small challenges that build up to a single barrier that prevents entry for people. Accessibility is an everybody issue. It impacts the whole community, and everyone in the community will benefit by increased accessibility. We're talking about parents who need to know that their kids will have bathrooms at an event. We're talking about planning for people who struggle with transportation. We're talking about people with limited walking range. They need to know a lot more details about an event before they can commit. And for our forays, by the time they find the answers, the forays are all full. So you can see the issue we're facing. We're accidentally excluding people from our organization. And I think we're in a great position to set a national standard for active inclusion and accessibility. But the question, of course, is how do we do that at our level? That's a big conversation, and I've got 10 minutes today, so we'll only get started. But I have an idea on where we can start. I'm going to end my presentation today by asking that we all keep one big question in our mind as we're planning things in the future. But I suggest we start by reporting a standard set of survey ratings. If the organization all uses the same terms and the same rating scale, then our members will know exactly what to expect when they commit to a foray. We don't reveal the location when we announce a foray, and I understand, the concerns involved with that, but it also prevents our members from doing any basic research ahead of time on if their needs will be met while they're at the location. They have to commit to the foray, wait to hear which location it is, and then do research to determine if there's a barrier for their entry. I'm suggesting that if we're not allowing our members to do research on a foray location, we need to take the responsibility of doing the research ahead of time. So I'm proposing we start with, as you see on the screen, a dual purpose trail survey and foray announcement card. This will allow our members, as they go about their personal foraging, if they identify a space where a future foray could be considered, they can fill out this card, submit it to the MMS for collection, and as the MMS develops its foray programs at the beginning of a season, it gives them more information to develop a series of forays that accounts for diverse needs and interests. And when the MMS announces a new foray, the same information used in the survey card can be used to inform members when signing up. Take a moment to look over the card, and we'll discuss the importance of each section and, in my vision, how they'll be rated. I have spent a lot of time thinking about this over the last few weeks, but I do want to note this is a first draft, and I'm investing in improving this card. I want to hear your feedback. I want us to have a conversation about this. And one thing before I get further into the presentation here, I also want to mention that accessibility isn't about tailoring every experience, every foray to the members with the most needs. It's about ensuring that everyone in the group has something that fits their needs, and it gives them the information ahead of time to know which events do. Accessibility in this way is about empowerment, and we want to empower our members. So getting into the individual fields here, they're pretty intuitive. I don't want this to be overly complicated, but I have written down some rules for each level. Trail difficulty simply is how difficult the travel service is going to be during the foray. It doesn't include considerations of, people going off trail, but strictly the main trail that the foray leader is guiding the foray group along. And I included a table here so that we can see pretty quickly that as our trail difficulty goes up, exclusions for who can participate also they increase pretty strongly pretty early. Moving along, parking difficulty here. It might not impact most of us very heavily, but it's a major concern for, families with young children, people who need wheelchair access, and anybody who doesn't want to walk a mile before even getting to the trail. This seems like a small challenge, but as I said before, it's a list of small challenges that become one barrier to entry. Trail distance here is to give foray participants an idea of how far they're going to be traveling on foot while at a foray, while also giving a sense of the furthest somebody's going to be from their car at a time if people are concerned about emergencies or they have something in their life that might, they might be on call for. It's also important to people who have potential pain flare-ups so they can estimate how long they're going to be doing this activity. Bathroom access should be pretty obvious why this is in here, but while it's important to all of us, it's a greater concern for people with specific needs. Again, we're talking about children here, but also people with medical concerns are particularly impacted by access to a bathroom. This next area is important to me because for me, intention is very powerful. And announcing our intentions leads to better communication with our members. The difference between foraging and scientific, I think we've all got a pretty clear sense, but I haven't really heard the community discussing what the intention of a given foray is, what the strengths of a given foray leader might be, and what we can expect to learn, or what's the point of us being in the woods on a given day. One leader can spend a lot of time focused on edible varieties, how to spot them, what trees you're looking for, time of year, environment, habitat, focused entirely on edible mushrooms, where another might spend their time talking about morphology and a mushroom's place in the ecosystem. And if we have multiple group leaders in a single foray, is each group going to have a different leader with a different focus? Having this discussion openly and, visibly helps members find the right foray for what they're particularly interested in. I figure in addition to filling in a bubble here, the foray leader can also use this space to write a few words about themselves and their personal intentions, what they want to accomplish on a foray. And finally, I want to call out special considerations. This covers anything that isn't captured by the rating scales, but maybe should be. Let's say a trail is paved and flat, so it would receive a 1, but 2 days after a windstorm, there's trees littering the pavement. Half the trails might be closed to someone in a wheelchair, but the others are easy. This a trail in that condition might receive a 1, but with a note and the special considerations. Same thing if, there's bathrooms at the parking lot, but the women's bathroom is closed. That's something we can capture in our notes ahead of time. But what I'm really asking here isn't that we implement a new rating card or that, I suddenly have a voice in how these things are happening. I'm asking people on the call to consider who might be forgotten when they're planning things. We always plan on our own bias, our own timetable, our own needs are considered, but we need to spend more time thinking about who's getting left out when we do that. As you're planning, ask the question, who am I forgetting? And it's okay if you don't come up with an answer. It's important that we ask ourselves and each other the question and talk about possible answers. By making it clear that we're trying to our membership, we're starting a conversation. We're telling our entire member base that we care, and people with accessibility needs that had not been considered or accommodated will feel more empowered to ask. And that's it, Kathy. That's my less of a presentation and perhaps more of a TED Talk.
Thank you so much. I love hearing that point of view. I love learning about that. And I would completely encourage you to present this to the Foray Committee and even consider joining the Foray Committee, because I think as our club has grown a lot, we're trying to create as many Foray opportunities as we can, and we really need your voice and your help. So thank you so much for that.
I would love to hear more.
Perfect. All right. So thank you, Michael.
Can I ask a quick question?
Mhm.
So what was your experience like at the Northwoods? I mean, were you able to actually participate in any of the forays that were there? I'm just curious.
Yeah, John, I did. I don't want it to come across as if I went to the foray and I found exclusively barriers. I joined forays every single day. I had a great time. I met people I learned an incredible amount from. It's just, as I was going through, I saw opportunities where I could have been included more, and the people around me could have faced less challenges in trying to access the information and the plan. So, no, I really, again, thank you so much. I am honored to have gotten a spot at the foray, and I'm going to be doing more of those.
Awesome. Well, thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Michael. Really appreciate it.
And you saw my invite as well to the Foray Committee.
All right. And Heather is our winner from, I'm forgetting now, 2020, who went to Potosi, Missouri with us this year. She's also our special events chair. She did a ton of work for the state fair, and she's on the technology committee helping with the website and helping wherever she can. We're actually going to do an event together in November at the Patagonia store.
We're seeing the presenter view right now.
Oh, you are again? How about now?
Good.
Thank you.
If you hear a little whining, it's just my dog. So there was so much to love about the NAMA 2022 National Foray. So I will start with the first day. I rode down with John and Claudette Lamprecht, which was huge. I really appreciated them being so welcoming to me. And we made sure that we arrived in time for the early bird foray. And I'm so glad that we did, because it was probably my favorite foray. It was right on the lodge property, and there were a lot of great people on that foray who went for this hike and made it particularly informative. There was one guy who I guess was at last year's NAMA. He was like a speaker at last year's NAMA, and he was helpful. And between him and John, it seemed like they were fielding most of the identification questions. This is also where I gleefully found a lot of black trumpets, which were already dehydrated because it had been so dry in Missouri that, first of all, we were having a tough time finding a lot of edibles, but we found tons of these black trumpets that you can see on the right and in the right hand of the slide here. And so all we had to do was just pluck them from the ground, and nobody had to pull out their dehydrator because they were just like absolutely potato chip crisp. And then you can flick to the next slide. And we even found a walking stick. Do you see him? Mm-hmm. He's the little bug right in the middle of the slide. So that's my attempt at humor. But along with this guy, we also found a couple of box turtles and a few animal skeletons. It was really interesting. The whole terrain there was very different. It was aside from being dry, it was also very, very rocky. Whereas here in Minnesota, we see a lot of soil and that sort of thing. It wasn't so much soil. It was like we were looking for mushrooms in rocks. It was interesting. And then you can go to the next slide. The iNaturalist app, that was something that was quickly adopted by the Foray attendees. It was talked about each night at the evening meetings, and people were encouraged to use it to be able to really help with that ID process. So you can see by this crust fungus in this slide that I observed that we were getting pretty desperate for things to bring back to the ID building. But while the drought made it tough to bring home baskets full of edibles, there was still a lot of variety to be found. I, as a little bit of a last minute person, I wrote this up on the 22nd, so 2 days ago. And that night, iNaturalist said that for the NAMA 2022 project, 82 observations were made, and 82 observers made 1,401 observations. And of those observations, there were actually 308 different species that were identified by 62 identifiers. So that was really impressive to me, considering how dry it was and just how tough it was to actually, I mean, there were a lot of people just coming back with not much. And so to find that level of variety, I thought was pretty impressive. And you can just go to the next slide. I learned a lot from all of the classes and the speakers, but my personal favorite was the watercolor painting class with Dennis Benjamin. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but that's how I'll say it. I had not painted since I was young, so it was really wonderful to try again. And when I was there, I remembered, and by the way, this picture on the left, this is what we were given for materials. So it doesn't look like a lot of paint, but a lot of us had a ton of it left over when we were done because you just don't use a ton of it. So that was really fun. And it was so fun to be able to try and recreate something on paper. The teacher was very encouraging. And his philosophy was that we do the best that we can, but it's art, it's not the real thing. So it's nice to let the viewer fill in some of the details for themselves as they engage with it. And I had never really thought of it that way before. And this mindset is really a great way to eliminate some perfectionism from your art. And when you paint, you're constantly trying to improve the painting, and that can sometimes cause trouble because if you take it too far, then you just wreck it. And so he really recommended stopping painting before you actually think it's time to stop. His wife also assisted in the classroom, and she was equally encouraging. And when she saw my painting, she stopped and she said, "This isn't your first time." And I told her it had been about a quarter of a century. And she said, "Well, I hope this inspires you to take it back up." And I think it might. I bought the 2 books that they recommended. And this winter, when it gets cold, I think that's one of the things that I'll do as I'm stuck inside. And I can turn to the next slide. After having some time to reflect on it, I would say that the most valuable part of the NAMA Foray was the community. Some members of that community were people that I already knew from our club. I was pretty proud to learn that the MMS had close to, if not the most members in attendance of any club. Kathy, do you know, did we have the most or were we second?
I don't know. Sorry.
We were right up there. I mean, we had a lot.
Maybe after Missouri.
Yes. And we are also very fortunate to have some pretty amazing members. So on the left is a picture of John announcing that Kathy had won the Harry and Elsie Knight in Service Award. And this award is presented to one person at NAMA each year for their service to their local club. And it was well deserved. Mm-hmm. On the right, you can see John and Claudette, and they're creating an observation this was our last foray of the week, and they're doing this in iNaturalist. And John was very diligent to observe as many mushrooms as possible. In fact, he made the most observations of any NAMA member at NAMA in 2022. But more importantly, he helped other NAMA members who are new to iNaturalist get comfortable using the app and making observations, and also just giving them information, because there were, despite it being this national foray, there were a lot of people who were very, very new to foraging. And so to have mentors and people like that helping them, it's just a really encouraging community. I got to meet many other great people at the foray. Some were people whose names I've seen in newsletters and emails and magazines for years, but had never met in person. And I think they were all so down to earth. And like John, they were generous with their time and their knowledge. And I think that that's something that can be said for most people who are interested in mycology. So long as we don't have to tell you our secret foraging spots, we'll tell you just about anything else that you want to know. So if you get the opportunity to go on a regional or national NAMA foray, I would highly suggest that you take it. And that's it.
Thanks, Heather. Now we're going to have John Lamprecht, who has been a member since 2008 and is our past president. He's the current MMS membership chair, and he's also on the NAMA Awards Committee.
Hey, thanks. So Heather already mentioned that we had a large presence, and this is almost all of us that were there. Actually flanking on both sides are our two scholarship, NAMA Scholarship Award winners, Heather and Aya on both sides, and a number of other individuals. Howard and Janet had left already. They wanted to beat the traffic home. Now, I don't know. I'm sure they had some other art thing that they wanted to see on the way home or something. So
more on that later.
Yes. So they're, to our knowledge, I think they're the only ones that are not in the photo. But it was a blast.
We're missing Ron in the photo too, but.
Oh, Ron? Wait a minute. Oh yeah, that's right. Ron was not in this picture. Yes. However, Ron is in this one. And as was mentioned before, Kathy, our own Kathy Urich, was awarded a very prestigious award. So she actually gets to attend the next foray for free as part of this award. Coincidentally, all three of us in this picture have won this award, which is kind of cool because there's actually one or two others from the Minnesota Mycological Society who have also won this award. And it's given to individuals who provide service to their local clubs. And that definitely fits the bill when you're talking about Kathy. So, and here's our two scholarship award winners. Aya is not able to join us tonight due to a family issue, but is going to report again either next month or via a video. They always feed you. So I always have to have a picture of the chow line here. And the food was really, really good. Every one of the NAMA forays I've ever been to, the food has been, I don't necessarily have high standards because I, like Michael, am a military veteran. I haven't done 8 years. I've spent a lot of time in chow lines and learned to eat pretty much whatever was out there. So, but the food was extremely good, I thought, and there were a lot of choices. They did a nice job. And there are mushrooms to be found, in spite of it being dry. If you look close enough in the moss, as you can see right here, there were some fleshy mushrooms that were to be found. It wasn't all just polypores and other and crust fungus and that kind of stuff. There was a number of things that we're able to see. And they always, I mean, the facilities are they go out of their way to try to find a very nice facility. And then this was just a phenomenal piece of art that was made specifically by the Missouri club for this. And it was in the entryway. And boy, if I could have fit that in my car somehow and snuck it away, I would have done that. But there's always walking, between the various facilities. Any one of the NAMA Forays I've ever been to, there has always been some transiting that you're going to have to do and some walking. So, take your step counter. Most of the time, at least between the buildings, is paved. There's, a lot you're going to have to move around, but they keep feeding you, so you have to work out that food somehow. Beautiful site. It had a lake and beautiful trees and everything, and it looked like it would be extremely productive and moist and all that stuff, but it was dry, as Heather said. However, that being said, we still found quite a few mushrooms. And one of the unique features of Missouri is this is not necessarily the best looking specimen. However, this is the true smooth chanterelle, the Lateritius, which they are actually proposing for their state fungus. They're in the process of trying to do the paperwork and putting in for this. At least that's what the rumor was. So we had, for a long time up here in Minnesota, thought that some of the chanterelles that we find that have very, very slight ridges are the smooth chanterelle, but it's nowhere near close. Basically there is no ridge to these guys, and there's sort of a kind of a peachish color, but a lot of that has to do with how dry the specimens were. There's also a lot of ugly mushrooms, and I bring this one up because actually I thought that this was some kind of old decrepit thing. And later on, I found out that this is actually a kind of a special mushroom. And actually, I was awarded a special Find of the Day sticker because I found this, and coincidentally, it was the subject of the doctoral work for one of our identification mycologists. So I sort of had an in by finding this. But when I saw it, I thought it was like an ugly bolete or a spent puffball of some kind of weird kind. But it's very firm, and it's ugly. But it was just an interesting specimen. So it's just one of the many that got turned in. And as Heather mentioned, this is just a screen share of the iNaturalist report for that. 82 observers, 1,401 observations. Now, I will give that a caveat here in a second. You see this one particular one right in the middle at the top. There was a group of individuals who were trying to document everything for their individual clubs, who were going through, and all of the tables and specimens that were laid out in our ID room, in our collections room, they were actually going down the tables one at a time. So the number of observations is a little bloated, but the number of species is quite accurate. 308 species for a time when it's so incredibly dry really was pretty spectacular. It surprised the heck out of me, but you can see, there's a great deal of diversity, and I sort of did expect that there would be a large amount of diversity down in Missouri, because it's similar to Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, as far as many of the mushroom types. There were a few different things, as like you saw the ugly thing. Plus there's a number of other ones. And the name of that one, as I think it's Pissolithus, is the genus. It's like that, and it stood out in my head. It stood out in my, because Okay, well, that sort of fits for an ugly thing, I guess. Start out sounding like, never mind. But anyhow,
a dyer's mushroom too, John.
yeah, it is. It actually can be used for dyeing. What? Oh, and the foray actually took place, let's see, it was the last week of September into the first week of October. So it was like the last 4 days or so of September into the first couple of days of October. And it, easy drive. Takes a little while, but it was very nice, very pleasant. Let's see what else. I had one more slide. I thought, well, maybe not. Anyhow, but this is a very, very good number. And there was one more thing that I did want to share, but I can talk through it because the slide isn't coming up. My favorite thing about the entire thing, and I almost get choked up about it, because one of the difficulties that we're having up here is we find really, really cool things. And even the fundus group is having some difficulty getting the information and the specimens documented and logged in and cataloged. And I made some good contacts at NAMA with folks from the Field Museum, especially, and a couple of specimens that were really special that have been found up here. We were able to pass on, and hopefully we'll get them sequenced and get them actually in a fungarium. Why that's important to anybody who's kind of new to the whole thing, the science side, it's great. I mean, almost every one of us joins the Mycological Society with the number one question is, can I eat it? And so we're foragers. I mean, most of us are, but then along the way, somewhere, the whole curiosity thing just starts to grab you, and the whole science side and learning about the different species and the different things, and that slime molds are no longer fungi, but we still include them in the photo contest, and all kinds of other geeky things we start to learn. And it's important because getting some of these specimens logged in and actually cataloged is teaching. We're the citizen scientists, and we are the eyes and ears. We're the feet on the ground, and we're the ones that see all the specimens. And unless we can work with the scientific community to pass that on, everything that we're seeing is kind of a waste. I mean, it's for our information, but it doesn't get passed on. We're learning things about the carbon cycle. We're learning things about the impact on the environment by specimens that have been logged into various fungarium that they're doing research on. And so the kingdom of fungi rivals the insects as far as the diversity. So there's a lot out there and a lot that has not been discovered. So that was the most exciting thing for me. I was able to make some really valuable contacts.
All right. Thank you, John. Awesome.
If I can add a comment, as one goes more and more, learns more about mushrooms and stuff like that, and you have questions, you find out that so much of this is poorly studied, and there's so much that isn't really known for sure. I mean, it's incredible what we, even in this area, all the things that we don't know about many of the species that we have here.
All right, this is Howard. Howard's been a member since 2011. He is the MMS photo contest and MMS banquet chair, and he's also on the NAMA board as the recording secretary.
Okay. Well, it's interesting that to see, we all went to the same foray, but had really different experiences. And I'll give you my slant on that. Janet and I, my wife and I, drove down Wednesday a day early so we could spend Thursday at the Missouri Arboretum in St. Louis. And we spent most of the day there on Thursday. Just an incredible place. Love. It's not up to. It's different than the Minnesota Arboretum, which is like the first or second ranked in the country. But it was still spectacular. Had a wonderful day there. So this is just a slide of. We like to do things in addition to the foray when we head out state like this. I will say that I have gone to 7 now NAMA forays, national forays, and plus cable this year, which was interesting. A little bit on that later. Kind of more of a preamble. I have to second that the Minnesota group has become kind of a second family almost. The friendships and collegiality within the group is phenomenal. And I find that to be true at the national level as well. I spend too much time on Facebook. I'm friends with mushroomers around the world. Almost, countries you wouldn't expect that would have any interest in mushrooms, and some like Italy, where it's a national pastime. So it's just an incredible group of people. Anyhow, enough of spending the first most of Thursday there. We next went to the Budweiser brewery because Janet loves those big horses, the Clydesdales. We both had the opportunity to tour and touch a Clydesdale. We've done this before, but it's quite an experience. You'll notice she has Janet has a little red bottle in her hand. They were passing out beers while you're doing this to make your experience even better. So that was the last thing we did Thursday before driving down to Potosi. Go ahead, and same thing. We were greeted with this incredible mushroom in the entry that was about 8-9 feet tall. It seems to have a buffalo growing out of its head. But the lake view was phenomenal. Had some pretty high expectations, although I knew it was going to be dry because all the way down there, we were seeing cornfields that were too early ready to harvest, that were brown, and the vegetation occasionally was green, but there we were, and a nice YMCA facility. Go ahead. Almost the same view as John's to the lake. The rooms faced right onto this lake in the middle of the national forest, and every day it was just a pleasure to look out the window and have our dining facility also having the same view. Go ahead. Give everybody kind of a sense of what a foray or a national foray is about. Every evening there's a group presentation, finds of the day, specialty talks, discussing the forays that are going to be coming up, etc. So it gives you there's a strange looking hat right in the middle of that picture. Anybody spot that? Never mind. So that was just down the hall from our room. Go ahead, next one. I'm going to be quick tonight. What I didn't say is that there's a gathering, social time afterwards, and I ran into an individual who had spent a good chunk of her career surveying the national forest that we were in. So I was after, gee, what are your secret areas to go to? What's going to be wet? Where are the mushrooms going to be? I didn't go on any of the forays. I followed her directions about 15 miles into the woods on logging trails and little one-lane gravel roads into the middle of nowhere. Said, oh, this is the area where there's a lot of springs. and so it should be wet, and it's kind of what was the word she used? It's a wet area that a creek runs through. So it took about an hour and a half to get there, all of 15 miles because of the road. And indeed, there were springs that were absolutely crystal clear. I didn't find any mushrooms there, but I did find a rock. There's rock outcroppings everywhere, and covered with little crystals. So brought a crystal back. And then in the upper right there is something that was littering the ground. It's about the size of a potato. I'd never seen those before. Anybody know what they are? Well, I found out. They're
Pawpaw.
Yeah, pawpaws. Broke it open, and it was kind of a slimy, mushy thing full of huge black seeds inside. It smelled kind of good. Apparently, people find them delectable. I didn't know about it, or I might have tried. But that's kind of, instead of mushrooms, these are the sorts of things I enjoy finding on my trips into the woods, whether it's mushrooms or not. And those of you that know me, I probably don't go on many of the group forays because I always fall behind and take pictures. And I don't know, Michael and I probably do real well together out there. Get about 10 feet into the woods, and all of a sudden you're stopping and observing stuff, and the rest of the group goes on ahead and whatever. So that's kind of my finds of the trip. One of the reasons I went down there, of course, is this is my 6th and final last year as secretary for NAMA, which means for the last, it's a maximum term of 2 3-year terms. I have learned about what NAMA is doing because I attend every annual meeting and the board of trustees meetings, which is comprised of representatives of all of our member clubs, our regional trustees, board members, institutional trustees. This year we had 30 in attendance, and I also sit in and take notes on all of the executive committee meetings, most of which have been by Zoom over the last couple of years. But this gives you just kind of a handle on the first couple pages of notes. It's just people who are attending. And go on to the next slide. It's interesting. Our president, a NAMA president this year from neighboring Wisconsin, Trent Blizzard, gave his overview, and I just wrote down some of the things that happened over the last year that he found of significance, and I would agree. Number one, he said the committees are where the action has been and continues to be, and that's very true. The more involved you are, the more you enjoy being a participant. Let you know we have 3 regional trustees positions that are open, not for our region. The other thing is that NAMA has grown, especially with Zoom, just as the Minnesota Club has. The membership has increased, and so have the duties of the various officers. So we're moving to become a more professional organization beyond being led by volunteers, having some positions that are receiving a stipend, although they're not really big. They're ranging from $5,000 to $12,000, because a lot of these activities take 20 hours a week. That's a lot of volunteer time. Next, as is evident, well, yeah, I was going to talk about forays, but that's all right. Okay. The forays are a primary reason for being a NAMA member, the regional forays and the national forays. And as Kathy said there's an executive foray that the board is working to develop by bringing in a professional travel planner. We don't know if it'll be Mexico or where it might be quite yet. It could be Costa Rica or some other Latin American country. It'll be a special one in addition to next year's national foray. And then lastly, a culmination of about 3 years work updating NAMA's policy manual, which is on one level kind of boring, but got into a lot of detail. And we have, along with Barbara Ching, last year's president, Trent and myself, have rewritten a substantial part of the policy manual. And now that I'm coming off the board, I may be able to throw my 2 cents worth of what I've garnered back to the Minnesota Club and its work. But go ahead now, next slide. Just a little bit of a shot of the vouchering table where the specimens are brought in. I think most of you have seen this sort of thing. We did end up leaving a day early to get back to another obligation, but when we were there were already well over 100, 150 different specimens that have been brought in. I'm amazed that we got 308 species, given what I didn't find in the woods. Everything I found was really a dried up old specimen, which I didn't bring in for vouchering. Next. So every night there's also a winner of the find of the day. Now, John Lamprecht got one, but here's one I had never seen before. Sycamore leaf spot, bullseye spot. I won't even attempt to say whatever the name it is, but that's the kind of thing that was being brought in. It's an interesting fungus that grows on oak leaves and creates a bullseye spot. So what you just never know what you're going to see in the vouchering tables. Next. Oh, this is kind of a screwed up looking slide. Got turned around sideways. I don't know how that happened. One of the presentations, well, several of the presentations was on the identification and vouchering process. If you can turn your head sideways, you can see where your specimens go after they've been vouchered, dried, and sequenced, if they are honored with that. This is a shot of the vouchering, the fungarium at the Field Museum. That's on the left. And some of the new techniques of sequencing the genomes and student assistants putting their time in to categorize this massive amount of material stored in envelopes and other little boxes and things in drawers at the Field Museum. Next. Always learn something new. I did not participate in the microscopy session, but there were about 15 people that worked on microscopes, learning how to use them and bringing that knowledge back to their respective clubs. The thing that I did find really interesting is the number of plastic containers like the one on the right that were used for bringing specimens back and keeping them separated from each other. Looks like probably a fishing tackle box or an art box of some kind. And people were taking these out into the field in their basket or in bags, and might have 2 or 3 of them to bring specimens back. Interesting technique, something I think I might be doing in the future. I've got some of these around here. Never thought of using them for forays. Next, party night. Is there enough said? There's Trent and Kristen Blizzard, the president and the person behind his forcefulness. Actually, both of them, I suppose, Kathy and Kirsten, and there was kind of a dress-up night, which I wasn't aware of, or I would have brought my spotted undergarments out, I suppose. Next.
It was very last minute, and we hit a secondhand shop in Potosi and stocked up.
It was amazing. There were certainly several dozen people that did that. However, when we got back, what should I find in dry Minnesota, but probably the last hen of the year, that two of them on a stump that I found them for the last 6-7 years, same stump. A little bit dried on the edges, but the insides were pretty darn good. And after finding this guy, well, it was in between that. I also was blessed with a case of COVID, and hope I didn't spread that when I was down there, because it seemed like it appeared a couple of days after I got back, and there were a few other folks that I heard had that. And then all done, I got negative tests, and then a couple of days later it was positive again, then it was negative, and I've been good for the last week and a half. Guess who tested positive yesterday? Janet has it now, so bugger. In any case, it's all, so far, knock on wood, it's all been very light and a quick turnaround on it. So there's my trip to Mo-Nama, the 7th National Foray. Plan to go to some more, hope to.
Thanks, Howard.
Yeah.
I'm gonna follow you with what I did on summer vacation, because mine's a lot like Howard's, where I don't just want to get to the foray. I want to see the place that I haven't seen before on the way to the foray. And unfortunately, we left a little later than we hoped, and it is a fair amount. It's a decent drive on the way down. It was about 9 hours. So when I was kind of saying I wanted to see the arch as we drove past it, they were like, there it is, take a picture. So that's about as close as I got to the arch. And then we got a Airbnb in a sweet little neighborhood in St. Louis, and kind of walked around the neighborhood. And I was just really enthralled with this display in the front of the antique shop window. So I took a picture of that. And then, as Howard was saying, with the pawpaw and the and the rocks, there are other things to forage. And right outside of the antique shop, there was a hole in the road where they were renovating. And my husband's a potter, so we're like, oh, it's clay, let's make something. And we were so proud of it. We sent a picture to our friend in San Francisco. When you talk about lifelong friends, one of the first people I met at one of the NAMA forays, I've been friends with ever since. And we sent him a picture, like, look at what we found. And he said, are you dung beetles? And we were like, oh yeah, it does kind of look like a pile of poo. So we were so proud of our find, and it didn't translate as well as we thought it did. But there was that. And then there's the beautiful lake that you've seen from everyone. When we pulled up, it just looked so lush and green and beautiful, but like everyone said, it was pretty dry. But we really enjoyed the facilities. And my husband Fred is really into ancient sites, and one of the state parks that they did a foray in also had these petroglyphs that were protected. So we really enjoyed seeing that. And he got to do a side trip to the Cahokia Mounds, which are right near St. Louis there. So I would encourage you, if you go on a NAMA foray, to kind of peek around the area and see what else there is to see while you're there. I was mentioning that I'm the marketing chair for NAMA. And I would encourage you to check out the NAMA Instagram account. The way they run that is they have a different person take over the account every week. So each week, someone from, it could be anywhere in the world, takes over and posts their findings. Well, it was my job to post during the week of the NAMA foray. So while I didn't take the microscopy workshop, I kind of peeked in. I didn't take the painting workshop either, but I stopped by and took pictures, and I just kind of floated around and peeked at what everyone was doing. And this is one of the pictures, I guess, going along with our Halloween and skull theme again. This is Dennis Benjamin, one of the teacher, and one of his really neat paintings of the toxic species. And I think we all also mentioned that MMS really does represent. So I'm proud of everyone making it down there and hanging out. And truly, even though we spend a lot of time together on Zoom and maybe get to go on a few forays during the summer, it was nice to just see everyone and feel like we were on vacation together.